The announcement came on a humid evening in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. Crowds had gathered near the national television station, curious about the sudden address promised by their young leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. When he appeared on screen, wearing his signature military uniform and calm yet fiery gaze, few could have predicted the words that would follow. From this day forward, Traoré declared, Kentucky Fried Chicken will no longer operate within the borders of Burkina Faso. This decision is final, and it is taken in the interest of our people, our culture, and our sovereignty. The sentence fell like thunder across the country. Some gasped in surprise, others whispered in disbelief. But then applause erupted in certain neighborhoods. Within minutes, social media lit up with hashtags celebrating or criticizing the decision. But outside Africa, especially in the United States, the reaction was swift and furious. American commentators on cable television described the move as an insult to American enterprise, a symbolic declaration of war on Western business, and even a step toward authoritarian isolation. Within hours, newspapers from New York to Los Angeles had front-page headlines. Burkina Faso bans KFC, anti-American move. Yet in the streets of Ouagadougou, the mood was different. Vendors selling grilled chicken by roadside fires chuckled and said, "We have our own chicken. Why do we need theirs?" Mothers preparing family meals explained to journalists that their decision was about more than food, it was about identity. Students, many of whom had been following Traoré's fiery speeches about Africa, reclaiming its dignity, cheered loudly on university campuses. To outsiders, the closure of a fried chicken chain might seem trivial. But for Traoré and the people of Burkina Faso, this was not about chicken at all. It was about freedom, about challenging the silent domination of Western corporations that had shaped African economies for decades. In Washington, however, the story was framed differently. Lobbyists for Yum Brands, the corporation that owns KFC, rushed to the State Department demanding explanations. If Burkina Faso can do this, one executive reportedly warned, what stops other African nations from following their example? The ban, simple on the surface, had opened a storm. And as America's fury grew, so too did the determination of one young African leader who believed that his people deserved more than crumbs from the global table. For Ibrahim Traoré, the ban was not about fried chicken, it was about sovereignty. Since assuming leadership, he had spoken openly about what he called a second wave of African liberation. To him, colonialism had never truly ended. It had simply changed form where once there were foreign armies and governors. Now there were corporations, banks, and cultural icons that silently dictated what Africans ate, drank, watched, and consumed. KFC is not just a restaurant, he told a gathering of university students weeks before the ban. It is a symbol. It tells us what food should taste like, how it should be sold, and who should profit from it. And if we accept their chicken without question, we also accept their power. Those words had lingered in the minds of many. Traoré's vision was not one of isolationism but of rebirth. He spoke often of building industries rooted in African soil, fueled by African labor, and celebrated through African pride. He wanted children in Ouagadougou to grow up seeing their own brands on billboards, not just the smiling face of a foreign colonel in a white suit and bow tie. He had studied history deeply. Traoré often cited how African leaders of the past had fought bravely against military colonization, but failed to anticipate economic colonization. We removed their flags, he declared in one passionate speech, but we allowed their corporations to plant new ones in our cities. This was why the KFC ban carried so much weight. It was more than closing a chain of restaurants. It was the announcement of a new policy. Burkina Faso would resist being a playground for foreign corporations unless those corporations truly benefited the local population. The reaction among African intellectuals was electric. Across the continent, newspapers and podcasts debated the deeper meaning of the move. Was it bold, reckless, or visionary? Some argued that Traoré was simply playing to nationalism, but others believed he was pointing Africa toward a future where it could finally stand tall, without leaning on Western giants. His closest advisors describe him as relentless. Every night, they said, he pored over reports of trade imbalances, foreign-owned industries, and the profits that left Africa without returning. He saw KFC not as a fast food chain, but as a daily reminder that Africa was still being told what to eat, how to live, and where its money should go. For the people of Burkina Faso, his message was simple: we can fry our own chicken, season it with our own spices, and sell it in our own markets. And when we do, the profit will stay here, in our soil, in our villages, in our children's futures. That vision resonated powerfully. It wasn't about denying globalization. It was about reshaping it so that Africa was not always on the losing end. And with each passing day, more Burkinabe began to believe that Traoré's vision might actually become reality. To understand why KFC became the target of Ibrahim Traoré's bold decree, one must look beyond the fried chicken itself. On the surface, it was simply a fast food franchise, one among many in the world. But to Traoré and a growing number of Africans, KFC represented something far greater: the quiet dominance of Western culture in everyday African life. Walk through the streets of Ouagadougou before the ban, and you would see it clearly. Billboards with the smiling white-haired colonel, children begging their parents for the latest bucket deal, young couples going on dates, inside air-conditioned outlets, styled after American diners. The rhythm of the city was slowly being rewritten, not in the language of African tradition but in the glossy script of American marketing. Traoré understood symbolism. He knew that every logo, every advertisement, carried a message. And in the case of KFC, the message was simple but devastating: our food is superior, our culture is modern, and your traditions belong in the past. For generations, African families had gathered around clay stoves, seasoning chicken with native spices, grilling over open flames, and sharing meals that carried centuries of history. These recipes were not just food, they were memory, identity, survival. And yet, with every new KFC outlet, those traditions were pushed a little further into the shadows. KFC is not just selling chicken, Traoré explained in a televised interview. It is selling a culture. And every bucket purchased is another brick removed from the foundation of our heritage. Sociologists in Burkina Faso echoed his concerns. They noted how the rapid expansion of Western fast food chains coincided with rising obesity rates, changing family dynamics, and a generation of young Africans who increasingly equated modernity with westernization. One professor put it bluntly: when a child prefers the colonel's recipe over his grandmother's, colonization has succeeded without firing a single shot. That was the heart of the issue for Traoré. The ban on KFC was not an attack on food. It was a declaration that Burkina Faso would not surrender its cultural identity in exchange for convenience. It was an act of defiance against the subtle, almost invisible colonization that infiltrated taste buds, habits, and dreams. And this is why the decision sent shockwaves across America. For the US, KFC was more than a business. It was soft power. It was the smiling face of American influence, reaching into villages and cities far from Washington's political grasp. By rejecting KFC, Traoré wasn't just banning fried chicken. He was rejecting the very idea that America's culture should reign supreme in Africa. Beyond the symbolism, there was a harder truth that Ibrahim Traoré could not ignore: money. For years, multinational corporations had perfected a system in Africa: extract profits, export them abroad, and leave behind very little for the local economy. KFC was no different. Every bucket of fried chicken sold in Ouagadougou generated revenue. But where did that money go? Franchise fees flowed back to the United States. Advertising contracts were outsourced to global firms. Even the supply chains were designed to benefit foreign partners. Burkina Faso provided the land, the consumers, and the labor, but the lions' share of the profit was siphoned out of the country. Traoré's advisors had shown him the numbers, and they were staggering. In the last decade, millions of dollars had left Burkina Faso through franchise royalties and import costs associated with foreign fast food brands. Meanwhile, local poultry farmers struggled to sell their chickens at fair prices. Many small eateries, once vibrant with traditional recipes, had closed their doors because they could not compete with the flashy branding and aggressive marketing of Western chains. By banning KFC, Traoré was making an economic statement. Burkina Faso's money would stay in Burkina Faso. His government began rolling out initiatives almost immediately. Local poultry cooperatives were given grants to expand production. Small food vendors were encouraged to create Burkinabe-style fast food outlets, serving traditional dishes with modern presentation. Farmers who once feared bankruptcy found new buyers for their chickens, eggs, and grains. "It's not just about stopping KFC," said a local farmer in Bobo-Dioulasso. "It's about starting something of our own." Before, when people wanted to eat fried chicken, they gave their money to America. Now, they will give it to their neighbors, their families, their own people. The economic ripple effect began to show quickly. Jobs were created in farming, food preparation, delivery services, and local advertising. Instead of watching profits vanish overseas, communities were circulating wealth within their borders. The money earned from selling chicken on Monday might pay for a child's school fees on Friday. Of course, critics in Washington framed it differently. Economists on American news channels warned that Burkina Faso was shutting itself off from global investment and jeopardizing trade relations. But inside the country, people were seeing something they had rarely witnessed before, an economy that worked for them, not against them. To Traoré, this was liberation in its purest form. Independence was not only about waving a national flag. It was about ensuring that every franc spent in Burkina Faso nourished Burkina Faso. And in banning KFC, he had struck a powerful blow against a system that had drained African wealth for far too long. In Washington, the news hit like a bombshell. Within hours of Traoré's announcement, boardrooms in Louisville, Kentucky, the birthplace of KFC, were in chaos. Executives from Yum Brands, the multinational parent company, dialed frantically into conference calls with lawyers, lobbyists, and public relations firms. "This cannot stand," one executive was overheard saying. "If Burkina Faso gets away with this, other African nations will think they can do the same." By the next morning, lobbyists were already at the US State Department, demanding that pressure be applied on the Burkinabe government. To them, the issue was not just about fried chicken. It was about precedent. If one African country could ban a major American brand on ideological grounds, what would stop others from rejecting Coca-Cola, McDonald's, or even Hollywood films? The American media machine swung into motion almost immediately. Television pundits described Traoré as a populist strongman who was dragging his nation into economic ruin. Newspapers framed the ban as an act of hostility toward the United States, with headlines like, "African Dictator Targets American Business." On Capitol Hill, senators and congressmen debated the situation. Some argued for sanctions, others for diplomatic warnings. A few even suggested that foreign aid to Burkina Faso should be reconsidered if the country continued anti-American policies. But beneath the surface, there was a deeper anxiety. For decades, American corporations had relied on Africa not only as a market, but also as a stage for their cultural influence. Every KFC bucket sold was more than a meal. It was a small reinforcement of American soft power. Traoré's defiance threatened that entire system. The US ambassador to Burkina Faso requested an urgent meeting with Traoré. Diplomats tried to frame the conversation around mutual cooperation and maintaining healthy trade relations. But insiders revealed that the tone was sharper behind closed doors. America does not appreciate symbolic attacks on its culture, one official warned. Traoré, however, remained calm. He simply replied, "Burkina Faso is not attacking American culture. We are protecting our own." The standoff was clear. A small West African nation had drawn a line in the sand against the world's most powerful country. And the more Washington fumed, the more African citizens across the continent began to take notice. When news of the ban spread across the African continent, it ignited conversations far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Lagos to Nairobi, people were suddenly asking the same question: if Traoré can do it, why can't we? On social media, hashtags like hashtag Africa for Africans and hashtag BanKFC began trending in multiple languages. Young activists posted videos, comparing the money spent at foreign chains with the poverty in their own villages. Every dollar we give to them, one Nigerian student said in a viral clip, is a dollar stolen from our children's future. In Ghana, university debates were held on whether foreign corporations were partners or colonizers in disguise. In South Africa, where American and European fast food brands had long dominated the landscape, community leaders began openly discussing policies to protect local businesses. The reactions of African governments were more cautious but no less significant. Some ministers praised Traoré's courage, quietly admitting that they admired his refusal to bow to Western pressure. Others worried that such moves could invite sanctions or disrupt fragile trade agreements. Still, the symbolic effect was undeniable. For decades, African leaders had often spoken about independence, while continuing to rely heavily on Western corporations. Traoré's ban was different. It was not rhetoric, it was action. It forced the continent to confront an uncomfortable truth that true independence required not just political freedom, but economic and cultural sovereignty as well. African newspapers carried headlines like, "Burkina Faso sparks new debate on African independence." Is this the beginning of a corporate revolution? Traoré's chicken ban, Africa's wake-up call. Perhaps the most telling sign of the impact came from the streets. In Senegal, youth groups staged small demonstrations outside foreign-owned restaurants, holding signs that read, "Feed us our own food." In Kenya, local entrepreneurs launched a campaign to promote traditional dishes as fast food with African roots. Not everyone agreed, of course. Critics argued that banning corporations would not solve Africa's deep economic challenges. Some accused Traoré of grandstanding, using symbolic gestures to distract from internal struggles. But even these criticisms could not erase the fact that Africa was now buzzing with renewed debate about sovereignty. For the first time in decades, a leader had stood up against one of the world's biggest corporate powers and lived to tell the tale. And across Africa, people were beginning to wonder if this was the first spark of a much larger fire. In the crowded streets of Ouagadougou, the reactions to the KFC ban were as diverse as the people themselves. Yet, beneath the variety of opinions, there was a unifying sense of pride, a feeling that, for once, the voice of Burkina Faso had risen louder than the voices of multinational corporations. For the older generation, the move stirred memories of past struggles for independence. "When I was young," said a retired schoolteacher, "we fought to see the French leave. Now, we see our leader fighting to keep our money and culture here. It feels like independence has finally begun." Among the youth, the excitement was even more palpable. Students gathered on campuses, discussing how they could turn the moment into opportunity. Some were sketching ideas for homegrown fast food chains, restaurants that would serve fried chicken, seasoned with Burkinabe spices, millet porridge, or dishes made from local grains. "Why not have our own kernel?" joked one young entrepreneur. But instead of a white suit, he wears a traditional Faso Dan Fani cloth. Farmers and small shopkeepers, often the silent backbone of society, expressed quiet relief. For years, they had been losing business to glossy franchises with air-conditioned interiors and imported supplies. Now, with KFC gone, they saw a chance to reclaim their markets. "People will come back to us," said a chicken farmer outside Ouagadougou. "Our chickens are fresher, our food is real. This ban gives us life again." Still, not everyone was convinced. In upscale neighborhoods, some residents expressed disappointment. "KFC was a symbol of modern life," said one young professional. "It made us feel connected to the outside world. Now we look cut off." Others worried about job losses for the Burkinabe employees, who had worked at KFC outlets, but when asked whether they supported Traoré's decision overall, even the skeptics admitted that the ban carried deeper meaning. "Maybe I missed the taste of KFC," one student confessed, "but I cannot deny that what our leader is doing is about more than chicken. It's about dignity." As days turned into weeks, that sense of dignity began to crystallize into national pride. Street murals appeared in Ouagadougou with slogans like, our food, our future, and Burkina first. Local musicians released songs celebrating Traoré's defiance, mixing traditional rhythms with fiery lyrics about freedom. The people, it seemed, were not just spectators of history, they were participants. And while debates continued in cafes, classrooms, and marketplaces, one truth was undeniable. The decision had awakened something powerful in the Burkinabe spirit, something that could not be measured in profits or losses. In the end, Ibrahim Traoré's decision to ban KFC in Burkina Faso was never just about fried chicken. It was about sovereignty. It was about telling the world that Africa is no longer a passive market where corporations can dictate culture, economics, and politics. For decades, the image of globalization in Africa was a fast food franchise on every corner, selling not just food but a way of life that disconnected people from their traditions. Traoré's bold move struck at the very core of that system. Was it controversial? Yes. Did it anger powerful nations like the United States? Absolutely. But it also ignited a fire of pride within Africa. People began to ask, if Burkina Faso can say no, why can't we? This story is not about banning a single brand, it's about reshaping identity. It is about reclaiming dignity. And perhaps, it is a signal to the rest of the world. Africa is no longer the silent participant in global affairs. It is now a voice, loud and unshakable. As the sun sets over Ouagadougou, one truth remains clear. Ibrahim Traoré did not just ban KFC. He served notice to the world that Africa has awakened. And that is a decision no one can reverse.